fire problems at that point in time. So I got heavily engaged in fire activity. From Fort Myers, I became the fire chief, and we basically fought 10,000 fires a year. That was our average. We looked at prescribed burning and improving prescribed burning in the state, which is basically for forest health purposes. Prescribed burning and the southern forest are just hand and foot. They go together. And so if you prescribe burn, you can reduce wildfires.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest issues was liability. People were having fires escape, people were, and they weren't doing anything necessarily completely wrong. They were having smoking on the highway and being sued for accidents. So we worked, and this was a chain. Most foresters go to forestry school to be in the woods. But if you want to earn enough money to make a living and take promotions, you eventually end up getting promoted to where you're dealing with politics and people. And so my role became one of trying to help sell the legislature on the need for a prescribed burning law that allowed people to, as long as they did everything right, or took us an extra special training class, then there was a certified burn law that protected them from lawsuits.
Gotcha. Okay.
And with that, and my other efforts, I married that up with trying to change the culture of the organization from being one that is extremely proud of what they were in suppression to being extremely proud of prevention. And so I coined a phrase that the very first day you went into training with us to become a firefighter, it said, when you fail at your primary mission, you will need what we've learned here. And your primary mission was fire prevention. And so between the two, we went from a 10,000 fire average year to a 5,000 fire average year.
Wow, okay, this is a significant drop.
That's a significant drop. But it shows what you can do if you put the effort and time into it. And you don't change the culture of an organization overnight. It took several years, but when I would go out to the field and I have people say, you ought to see what we did in this prevention effort, rather than you ought to see what I did on it. You should have been here for the last fire. To me, that was when the culture started to change, and that's when it really got to be good.
So how did you help make that shift? That seems like a really hard mindset shift. I mean, it's totally different operationally. I mean, I know that maybe the 1990 Act would help with some of the management of the fires, the prescribed fires, that is. But how did you actually help change that mindset?
Well, what you have to do as a leader is go out and ask those questions. Don't ask them about the last fire. Look at the fire equipment, but ask them about, hey, what have we done? What have you done with prevention? What efforts are you making? Or if I happen to know something, then when I went in, I would say, hey, I saw you guys did this. I really like it. It really looked good. And so if it becomes that important, there's always going to be those naysayers that you're not going to convert over. But if it becomes extremely important to the boss or your leaders, then it becomes important to the people.
Gotcha. So once you moved on from this position, you started as a assistant director of state lands with the Florida DEP for 3 years. So could you talk about that experience? You said before that this position kind of turned into a little bit of political, and I would imagine you had had similar experiences with the DEP. Is that true?
DEP was, it was more political. There were a lot more people involved because of the different things that the Division of State Lands did. We charged leases for private lands. We did surveying. We bought land. We sold land. We tried to capture what the state owned. I mean, the legislature kept saying, "What does the state own?" And we didn't have that answer. And that's how I learned. That's how I got to know Kyra. We put out a bid, and my challenge, and the secretary called me in and he said, I want to be able to stand up in front of the legislature and answer their questions on what do we own. You've got, and so there was legislation passed that we would do this. And he said, you're going to do it. And he says, you've got no people and no money, but get it done. And so we put it out for bid. It was interesting to work with the people from Kyra. We truly worked as a partnership rather than a pure business relationship. We would sit down, I would sit down with the project lead, project manager, almost daily in the morning, and we'd read the statute. Are we capturing this? Are we capturing that? And we had like 65 or 67 different agencies that we had to gather information from and build a interactive working relationship. And so I guess one of my high points was when we went to a legislative process and they wanted a report and an update, and one of the senators said, well, we've asked for something, we've never gotten it, but this time we're getting what we want. And I appreciate the job that Division of State Lands is doing.
There you go.
That was good to go, man. You know, I mean, I look back at a couple of people from Kyra, and they were smiles, and I was smiles, and I said, we need to get, you know, in my mind, I'm going, I just need to get off this podium and get out of here. But it was that fact that they wanted the project to succeed as much as I did, that they put that interest and time into it, and it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, when you're trying to capture all of that land database from all those different agencies, but like I said, it was a partnership, and they were very interested in knowing what I needed in my business, and we did the whole project with 2 change orders.
Oh wow! Okay.
Which is pretty impressive. And I told them in the beginning I didn't want any, and because I had done some computer program work before, and I got in with a company that gave me change order after change order. And I said, we're not doing that. And the 2 change orders were basically, one was based on one of the decisions I made, and I was later told I have to change it by one of the legislators. But a great project, great working relationship. But we solved a lot of the Division of State Lands problems.
That's good. That's good.
So that was good. And so then it came time to move on from Division of State Lands, and so I set out on my own. Yeah. And I got invited to lunch with Push and Pashant. I ate lunch, and they asked me what my future was going to be. And at that point, I had formed my own company and was doing some outside work in fire training and some consulting forestry work. And then they said, about, I don't know, maybe a month or so later, they said, we'd like to get lunch again. And they offered me the opportunity to come to work part-time, and I was glad to do so.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's an impressive company.
Yeah, I'm super glad to be here. That's for sure. So in preparing for this Kyra talk, I actually talked with a bunch of people internally here at Kyra about your experience and what your impact has been on the company and all of the employees at this company. And, you know, they all said wonderful things. Like, I was shocked. Like, I don't think I've heard so many wonderful things about one person in my life. But here, let me read you this one quote. He said, he's exceptional with continuous performance and improvement and monitoring. So this is in relation to your leadership and mentorship ability. This was with, you probably actually recognize her, but she worked with you at DEP as well when you were the director of, or assistant director of state lands. And I was just wondering how you can actually kind of foster this constructive feedback within an organization. I know that it's really hard to kind of connect with employees to kind of foster that. How did you manage to do that?
Well, I think first off, you have to build a interactive relationship with all levels. I mean, you have to be willing to step back and look and say, okay, this is where we're trying to go. This is where the company is headed, or this is where the organization is going. And then you learn to listen as much as you talk. Listen to what people are saying, listen to what they're doing, and ask questions as to, well, why do we do it that way? Why do you do it that way? not try to tell them that there's a different way,
Mm-hmm.
but try to understand why they do what they do the way they're doing it. And then if you think there is a better way, when you don't blast right in, you just wait for a little bit of right time and say, hey, have you ever thought about trying it this way?
Mm-hmm.
And so my style is as a leader is to be able to work with just about anybody in the organization at any level. And this sounds a little funny for a technology company, but when I was with forestry, one of my mentors said, you need to be able to put a suit and tie on and go to the women's club today. You need to be able to sit on a fence post and chew tobacco with the farmer tomorrow.
Mm.
And so I've never felt that I was better than anybody. And I've always felt that my goal was to help people improve themselves. Because if people are improving themselves, then you're helping them grow and prosper and do better. And that helps the outcome of the company.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it does. I mean, at least here at Kyra, I've seen, everyone is definitely kind of striving towards the same goal. But how do you handle this when maybe someone's personal goals conflict with the company's goals or the organization's goals?
Well, if there are certain people who don't belong in certain companies, and you work with them. And I worked with several early on. My role was a little bit different than it is recently, but I actually counseled some people. One thing that a lot of people are afraid to do is tell people exactly where they are and what they're doing. I'm very tough evaluator. If we don't do performance evaluations per se, but part of my job is to let you know if I don't think you're doing right. And if I don't do that, if I put off doing that, which a lot of people do, they're afraid to sit down and have that tough conversation. But it's important, and it's not fair to that person for you to not sit down and say, listen, this isn't working right. We need to look at what's going on. What is your problem? It could be a personal outside problem that's influencing your work. It could be a problem that they don't know. They don't have the educational background or the skills to do it. Or it could be a problem that they're just not motivated and care. And, nobody should be surprised with some kind of action that says, listen, you're not making it. They should have had that conversation many times before.
Gotcha.
And if I'm not fair to you, if I didn't think you were doing your job and I don't tell you, and that's part of my job is to either supervise or if not supervise, oversee what you're doing, and I don't tell you that it's not working, then that's bad for me and it's not fair to you. And but young people have a hard time looking somebody in the face and saying, this isn't working, until they get pressure on them, and then they want to put it off on that other individual.
It's interesting. So what would you suggest a younger person do if they are not hearing from their boss, if they're not hearing this feedback?
There's nothing wrong with walking into your boss and saying, hey, can you give me a little bit of feedback? And if things are going okay, because as a boss, you should be giving people praise when things are going right. And praise, to me, you give praise when it's going above right. You give compliments when it's going right, and you give corrective criticism when it's not right.
That makes sense.
So there's three levels. But if I'm constantly telling you, hey, is it looking good, looking good, looking good, or if I happen to pass, that's just saying you're doing okay. But if I bring you in and say, hey, you did a really good job on this, that means I was impressed and you put forth effort that I saw over and above what I would consider average work.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, Mike, I don't want to take too much of your time. I really do appreciate you meeting with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think other than working here has been a pleasure, and hopefully I've helped some people grow here also.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. I've heard a lot. But thank you so much for sitting down with me and discussing your experience at the forestry and here at Kyra. And again, congrats on your recent accomplishments and awards.